Good morning, everyone. We're about to get started, so if I could ask you to take a seat, it'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Welcome. Good morning. We start by listening to our Managing Director.
Good morning and welcome to all. Let me start by thanking Bert and the Statistics Department for organizing the 12th IMF Statistical Forum on measuring the implications of AI on the economy. You always choose a topic that is timely and important and also fascinating. It has been just 2 years since generative AI emerged from the lab and became a tool that anyone with internet access can use. We still feel the excitement of something new and world-changing. And at the same time, we are all concerned about potential harm. AI has huge potential to boost growth and efficiency. Call centers, for example, have reported productivity gains of 34% among new and lower skilled workers. But AI could also disrupt labor and financial markets, and it could deepen inequality within and among societies, destabilizing societies at a time when many are already very polarized. To make AI a force for good that boosts inclusive economic growth, we need concerted, coordinated actions by governments, the private sector, and civil society. And what do we need to inform those actions? Data. Reliable, timely, accurate, actionable data. For the next 2 days, you will be exploring both how to measure AI's impact on the economy and how AI can help us do our jobs better. Let me pose a few questions to help guide your discussions. First, how do we strengthen our statistical systems and frameworks so that countries can better measure the impact of AI on sectors like healthcare, finance, and manufacturing? How do we ensure that we can capture AI investment and its impact on productivity? Second, over many years, countries have worked with international organizations such as us at the IMF to build ethical, strong, and transparent standards and guidelines for collecting, compiling, and disseminating official internationally comparable statistics, all while taking into account privacy concerns. Are the existing standards and guidelines fit for purpose in an era of widespread adoption of AI? Third, how can we leverage AI in the production of statistics? We see central banks exploring how Gen AI can help them sift petabytes of banking data to better monitor risks and refine forecasts. We see statistical organizations use AI to help classify transactions, transform unstructured data into robust indicators, and improve the accessibility of economic data. The IMF Statistics Department has recently established the IMF Big Data Center dedicated to supporting the use of big data and statistical innovation, and has also led the development of StatGPT, an AI assistant that lets users talk to data, significantly reducing the time needed to find, retrieve, and use data. But those are just a few examples. We want to know, how are all of you applying this technology? How can we act together to create and share better analytical tools with policymakers in all countries? With better data and analysis, policymakers can make better decisions, react more quickly in a crisis, and ultimately design policies that support inclusive growth. AI has transformative potential for the world economy and for our work, if we can figure out how to measure and use it well. And I'm sure you are all up for this challenge. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, policymakers, academics, business leaders, and fellow statisticians, good morning and welcome to the IMF. And to all joining us online, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zone. I'm very happy that you join us today and tomorrow. With many thanks to our Managing Director for the welcome remark, it's my pleasure to officially open this 12th Statistical Forum. And the tradition of this flagship event is to push the boundaries and explore cutting-edge topics that shape the future. And this year, we will focus on how AI is reshaping the global economy and which data are needed to understand both the benefits and the disruptive effects of AI on the economy. As the Managing Director said, data and statistics play a critical role in decision-making. And as AI is transforming the world we live in, it's important that we measure AI's economic impact. Without high quality, timely, and comparable data, policymakers will struggle to make decisions that maximize AI's potential while mitigating its risks. The task ahead is not easy. To understand AI's implications, we need to measure its impact across multiple dimensions, such as labor markets, productivity, firm dynamics, investment in innovation, and across multiple sectors like professional services, education, healthcare, government sector. Measuring the AI economy may require new or updated statistical frameworks, as statistical indicators were not designed to fully capture its dynamic effects. The IMF Statistics Department plays a central role in assisting our members in producing high-quality macroeconomic statistics. We help countries adhere to the international statistical standards, ensuring that the data is reliable and comparable globally. In this vein, we're also committed in assisting member countries with AI-related data and measurement challenges. Work has started, and I'd highlight two initiatives. First, the international community has updated the international macroeconomic statistical standards. This work includes new guidelines on measuring AI, cloud computing, non-fungible tokens in both the Balance of Payments 7th Manual and the System of National Accounts 2025, which both will be published next year. Our commitment to relevant statistical standards aimed at all countries, regardless of their level of development, can produce high-quality data that allow the users to effectively monitor AI's evolving influence on the economy. We already conducted workshops on measuring the digital economy for compilers in South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, and will do a more extensive outreach and offer training to help member countries prepare to implement the revised statistical standards. And the second, as already mentioned by our Managing Director, our Statistics Department has recently established the IMF Big Data Center, dedicated to support the use of big data and statistical innovations, AI and data science tools, at the fund and also in member countries. The center operates as a service hub to enable innovation, research, and collaboration in big data analytics, and will progressively step up efforts to support member countries using big data for macroeconomic statistics. Capacity development activities on the use of big data have already started. So far this year, we have trained about 60 country officials, on how to access and use satellite images and administrative text data to develop, among others, high-frequency indicators of economic activity. And in September this year, the center conducted the first training course on big data for macroeconomic statistics for 14 African countries in Kigali, Rwanda. As you know, the Statistical Forum brings together key stakeholders like policymakers, academics, businesses, and statisticians in a setting where diverse perspectives are discussed and help to shape a data-driven understanding of AI's role in the economy. And to facilitate these discussions, we have designed an exciting 2 days agenda. We will start the forum by a keynote speech by Susan Atti, professor at Stanford University Graduate School of Business, on embracing the future, navigating the opportunities and challenges of AI adoption, followed by a one-on-one conversation with IMF Deputy Managing Director Pauli. Session 2 will explore the horizon, where we will look at where AI is headed and which sectors will witness the greatest impact. During the lunch break on day 1, our statistics department will introduce StatGPT, an AI tool that will enhance the discovery and accessibility of official statistics using large language models without the hallucination. Session 3, we will look at shaping the future, examining AI's implications on jobs and productivity. And day 1, today, will conclude with a panel discussion on AI for all, navigating the unevenness in adopting AI. Day 2, tomorrow, will build on the foundations that we laid today, with 3 presentation sessions, 1 panel, and the concluding session. Session 5 will examine the power dynamics of AI and the resulting distributional implications. Session 6 will discuss from innovation to regulation and how AI is being used by firms and regulated by governments. Session 7 will highlight measuring AI, where we will look into some early attempts to produce official statistics and measures of the AI industry, AI investment, and the use of AI. And a panel discussion on measuring AI within macroeconomic statistics will discuss how national statistical systems will need to be adjusted to provide relevant data for users. And the forum will conclude with a keynote address and conversation by IMF First Deputy Managing Director Geeta Gopinath and David Weller, Senior Director of Emerging Tech, Competitiveness and Sustainability Policy of Google. And that is on AI at the crossroads, opportunity, risks, and the path forward. So thank you so much for joining us today and tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to the discussions we'll have, the insights we'll bring, and I hope this will lay the foundations for cooperation and knowledge sharing in the future. Now it's my pleasure to invite someone who perhaps does not need much introduction, Mr. Pauli, Deputy Managing Director of the IMF. He's responsible for many things, the IMF's work on about 90 countries, as well as on a wide range of policy issues, and most importantly, responsible for data and statistics. Bo, the floor is yours to kick off the first session of the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. Good morning. It is my great pleasure this morning to introduce Professor Susan Atti, Economics of Technology Professor at Stanford Business School. Susan received the John Bates Clark Medal in 2007 and is a member of the National Academy of Sciences. She was the 2023 President of the American Economic Association and served 2 years as Chief Economist at the U.S. Department of Justice Antitrust Division. Her research covers digitization, marketplace design, causal machine learning, and the design of complex experiments. She's the founding director of the Gallup Capital Social Impact Lab at Stanford. It is also very special for me personally today to introduce Susan because 30 years ago, we studied at the same time at Stanford. We share the same PhD thesis advisor. And of course, Susan was a few years ahead of me. She has always been a role model and a shining star that inspired me and many of the later students at Stanford. So very good to see you again, Susan. And Please, let me give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. And it's wonderful that you all have put together such a fantastic program on such a important topic. And so I come to this topic from a couple of different perspectives. Right now, I'm doing research on the methods of AI and machine learning and how you put it into practice. And I've been building transformer models even before ChatGPT came out, trying to understand how we can use them to do better economic analysis. Then in my work in the Golub Capital Social Impact Lab for the last 7 years, I've been building technology and trying to apply it globally for social impact problems, to try to bring the technology that used to be focused in the hands of a few in the biggest tech companies and help disseminate it and use it to augment people and to especially to work on as a general purpose technology to use it for social impact goals. Third, I've been working in policy, and as was mentioned, I was just in the Department of Justice where I had to think about antitrust policy, competition policy, prices, markups, and industry concentration, and more broadly, I'm part of a lot of the policy discussions. So today, what I wanted to do with my time is to give some frameworks for how to think about measurement. That's always the first step, the economic framework, but deciding what to measure before you start measuring it. And I especially want to highlight some of the things that I don't see talked about in the most superficial conversations. So I'm probably in an AI conference every other week these days, and there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of great material. There's many videos online if you want to see people talking about the future of work, panels. So I want to talk about some of the themes that are maybe a second level deep or maybe are a little bit less obvious if you're not closer into industry. So I wanted to start, when we say AI, and especially when we talk about generative AI or the very latest AI, it's kind of confusing because something like ChatGPT is both like the technology and it's the product. So we can all interact directly with that product. And that's not the way that things usually have been. Like the machine learning is buried very deep. But if you are scrolling through social media videos, you're seeing the videos, but you're not seeing directly the machine learning. But now the way that the generative language models work is that when you use them as a developer tool, it's very similar to how a user interacts with it directly. I would argue that's a very short-term phenomenon in the sense that we're going to get more and more layers on top of it. But right now, when you talk about it, it's very confusing whether you're talking about the developer tool or the consumer product. So I want us to just walk through a few different types just to get a sense that that individual consumer tool is like really a tiny part of the ecosystem and the industry. So just the developer tools here, and I've got on top kind of example applications and on the bottom kind of who's the target user. ChatGPT and OpenAI and also open source models like Llama provided by Meta are all developer tools in the sense that it's something like with the open models, you can download weights and you can just download code from GitHub. And then you can build things. And of course, the easiest thing to build is just an interactive model where you ask the thing general questions about the world. But you can put additional front ends on top of it that sort of change the question that's asked, so to turn what the user asks into something different, to make the answer look different, either to take advantage of certain information or to try to be factual or take a certain tone. Also, you can ask the user different questions or provide structure that would then change the query. So there's also developer tools, so there's back-end developer tools and front-end developer tools. So in some of the applications that I've done what's called fine-tuning the open models using specific data sets, either government survey data sets or like collections of scraped resumes if I want to study worker transitions. And so I use just software that I downloaded off the web, or I can upload my data to the cloud and push a button, and it learns from my specific data and then gives different types of answers. And so I can train these things to predict what's the most likely job for someone who's been a manufacturing worker for the last 10 years. If they change, what are they likely to change to? I can fine-tune these general models to do those types of prediction models and to do them more accurately than classic numerical models. The developer tools are just amazing. So I've been building stuff for my whole career, building, statistical models. In the last 15, 20 years, I've built a lot of machine learning models. We used to hire people who had to be really good at writing code, and you would write a lot of code. Doing the kind of exercise I just talked about can be almost no code because the tools are so good. If we used to use statistical software and things wouldn't converge and the things would get stuck and you'd get errors. Now the tools are very robust. They're sort of industrial scale tools available for free that sort of just work. Then, an additional things that happen on the developer tool side, if someone's going to build an application, either a B2B application or a B2C application, you need the foundation of it. You might need specific data that's specific to the application, and you might also want to bring in additional data. So if you're creating an app that's serving a business user to kind of give them relevant news of the day, you might need to subscribe to or buy a news feed of the latest news, which then gets integrated into the product and integrated into the responses. So there'll be an ecosystem of data feeds and subscriptions, which can be used in multiple ways. They can be used in fine-tuning a model, or they can be exposed directly to a user. And the app developer might subscribe to the data feed, or the app developer might allow a consumer to bring in their own subscriptions and summarize some of the information that comes out. So the tools ecosystem here is incredibly important, and it's just amazingly robust. And one of the things I'm going to come back to multiple times is that it's really very different than the past in the sense that the amount of technical expertise and the sophistication of coding skills you need has gone way down. So that you can take an undergraduate or a master's student who's never done this before and build something working in a week. And I've just never in my life been able to do that. So that has really massive implications for how this technology diffuses and whether it is in fact accessible globally in different environments. And I say, experimenting with these in government and seeing other people experimenting in government, the fact that there's so much that's free, there's no procurement cycles. You do have to get security approval, but if you make a nice little separated from the internet environment where you've downloaded stuff, that you can play with these things and build stuff and prototype it very cheaply. So I think we're more familiar, everybody, from their experience with the consumer user, so I'll just mention those quickly. But in addition to general purpose assistants like search, we also have things like tutors, things that can answer questions about health. Even in the US, even if you're rich, it's actually very hard to get someone to answer a specific question about your health that takes advantage of the latest research. I think getting everybody in the world the access to good information about them will be very important, although of course we'll have to come back to misinformation versus accurate information. We also will see these developed by platforms and businesses, shopping assistants, things that summarize reviews, agents, vacation planning. One thing that may be less obvious is that we're going to see more fundamental changes in a world where AIs work with AIs. So for example, if you think about a worker looking for a job, right now there are tools for workers to build resumes and workers to write cover letters. I know, as a professor, my inbox is now full of ChatGPT generated letters from all over the world of people telling me how their interests match my research and how they want to work with me. That makes it harder for me to screen people, and I don't read as many emails anymore because I get too many of them. A length and specificity is no longer a signal of actual interest in me or qualification for the job. On platforms, workers that are being hired on the part of the tools that are provided by recruiting platforms or tools that companies use to screen resumes, they're also using AI to screen the resumes. So we've got AI generating the application and AI screening the application. And it's already happening that in some of these marketplaces, they're anticipating a future where they will actually just build for that. They will just assume that's what's going to happen because it already is what's happening. But you have to fundamentally redesign a marketplace when the time spent doing things is no longer a signal of quality or interest. And you need to find other ways to actually discriminate. In terms of an application that I think is very important globally, especially for global development, is the fact that we can have tools for service providers. And this is something I've worked on in my research. For example, I've built software applications that help nurses counsel patients and help teachers work with students. So those types of applications can make a less educated person perform at a level as good as or higher than a more educated or experienced service provider. So that is really fundamentally important for thinking about the general equilibrium of all of this, because on the one hand, workers may get displaced. On the other hand, we may have tools that allow less educated people to be highly productive at things that would have been way out of their reach. The human now needs personal skills, they need to coach, they need to make sure that the student actually does the work and does the learning, they need to motivate you to do your exercises or your self-improvement or to finish your college course. They need to help you along the way, but they don't need to be content experts. And in fact, AI can also coach the coach to be a better coach. They can tell you how to coach and how to have the right emotional tone and exactly how to fine-tune your advice. So they can provide coach-client dashboards, communication, coaching guidance to really make service providers and we have so many professions where that can really scale. Nursing, teaching, childcare. Like we could do that one-to-one across the population, elder care. There are many, many jobs, and there are many services that need to be provided. If it was cheap to provide those services, there's lots of demand. Now, the other thing that I think we don't see as much unless you go to conferences or talk to business people where you get things off the record, a lot of this isn't on the web, is what's happening inside of firms. The internal business user is a customer. And I ran a conference, Department of Justice and Stanford ran one last spring where we had a lot of speakers from the business community. That's online if people are interested. But one of the things that we're seeing going very, very fast are the creation of at-scale AIs to automate business processes. So to make this concrete, Salesforce is an example. They spoke at the conference we had at Stanford, and they are really out there on the frontier of this. Why? Well, Salesforce has everybody's data in a common format, and Salesforce has lots and lots of users doing repeatable common tasks across firms. So you have HR processes, hiring processes. You have sales processes where everything you do with customer management, advertising management. Lots of firms doing exactly the same thing. And so Salesforce, the platform, has been building B2B software for the business customers of Salesforce who use AI, and the individual workers at those business customers use the AI to prepare for meetings, to create emails, and to automate their work. Salespeople were spending only 25% of their time on sales and most of their time on administration. And that administration part is getting automated. And I mention these examples because these are the things where it's already in place now. It's happening now. It's getting automated now. Millions and millions of workers are using this AI software, and there's incremental improvement every day. So these examples where there's the same business process that's repeatable, especially having your data in the cloud and in a common infrastructure, those are the places where the AI can just happen immediately. Another really big example, I've been talking about this example for the last 10 or 12 years, is customer service centers. And my prediction all along has been that at some point that technology is going to be better than the human. And because these things have already been automated, they're already plugged into computing, and they're already often provided with technology as a service, the moment that the technology gets better, everybody's going to change sort of all at the same time, like very, very fast. And it's not like electricity where you have to build a new factory. They're already using technology to augment the customer service people. And so we're already seeing there also just massive changes. This is one of the examples that comes up over and over and over again with people giving specific facts from their own organizations of massive productivity improvements and quality improvements from automating the most routine parts. Now, there's a big question with all of this. What happens next? Do you hire more salespeople? Because they're better at sales now. You know, the selling per person goes up because the administration was just loss. Or, you know, and so then the question really becomes, where was the bottleneck? Were there many people you could sell to and you just couldn't hire enough salespeople, in which case now employment won't fall, you'll just sell more, you'll just create more? Or was there a bottleneck where you were already selling to everybody you could sell to, and then you're just going to need less salespeople? I think we do see a fall in employment in the call centers, and that is one that really concerns me. I'll come back to that because that's geographically concentrated. There are many vulnerable geographical areas of the world that specialize in call centers, and those could be in trouble. Finally, sometimes the customer is actually another IT system. So when you're doing business process automation, you might have an AI system that now does a better job producing statistics that themselves feed into a system. So like advertising is already done in an automated way, digital advertising. And so you might build an upstream AI that just feeds into another automated system which does a better job advertising. So when I think about all of this and what's happening, it's important, therefore, not to over-focus on the consumer user, but to think about all of these other users. And that is in turn important for thinking about industry structure and concentration, because the needs of all of these different users are very different. And business customers in particular don't want all of their data to go into a big pool and be shared with everybody. And so that means that we're more likely to have lots of smaller companies succeed because they're not going to be just pooling data like we did in big internet services. So we may see, you know, not just one company doing everything for everyone. Also, business customers want their thing to be perfect for them. They're not willing to just take something that's just good enough for everyone. So understanding all of that foundation then allows us to think about how is industry structure changing as a result of these latest tools. So I started working on a search engine in 2007. At that time, I got very concerned about global economy because I realized there were like 2 or 3 companies in the world that had machine learning talent and experience doing stuff at scale. And I went to Europe and I went to other parts of the world and I thought, how are you ever going to participate in this when you cannot get the know-how unless you're inside the companies, and all of the employees of the companies are like in one city. Now, they ended up running out of employees in that city, so they did hire more globally. But nonetheless, that was a very scary moment. But what's happened since then is, even in the 2010s, is that more things got built into being sort of like services that you could buy, like cloud computing. You know, cloud computing didn't exist when I started working here, so you had to build your own data infrastructure. Now you can just buy or get for free the software that we spent when I was chief economist at Microsoft. We spent, you know, several engineers taking 6 months to build software that's just free, just the software to do the analytics. But even as the cloud computing and data markets and software developer tools diffused during the 2010s, it's still the case that a lot of the high-end machine learning had to happen at larger companies. It just didn't work in smaller companies, and everything was so finicky that you needed very specialized people with experience to do it well. So you just didn't see it diffusing very well to smaller organizations. And you know, smaller companies just couldn't afford to hire the talent that had the experience to really build things. What's happened and changed with this sort of foundation model paradigm is a lot of that engineering and compute is happening underneath the foundation layer. So one company is gathering a lot of data and getting a huge amount of compute and synthesizing all of it to create a foundation for understanding human language. But it's not just language. There are lots of foundation models out there for everything from biology and chemistry to other types of specific context. What that means is on top of that now, there's also developer tools, no-code tools, so that many smaller organizations can build on top of it if they don't walk in the door with a lot of data or a lot of tools. And again, I just really want to emphasize that you can build your own apps here without any coding skills. Now, you still need statisticians and data scientists to understand whether it's working and why it's working, to measure its success. But to build it and to make something that works, you don't need experience or coding, because the coding is done by other people, and actually natural language coding is already really good. My Stanford engineering students are already having 70 to 80% of their code written with AI assistance, even the computer science students. So the coding, detailed coding knowledge is less important. And so that's really fundamental for what you can do. And so we're seeing, as a result, like social scientists, development economists are building tools, building teacher assistant tools, building agricultural advice tools without having to hire an engineering team. And I've been doing this myself at Stanford. I've been hiring engineers and building stuff, but now, before I could do things, nobody else could do them. Now anybody can do it. So that's really exciting, and that's, I think, very optimistic view of how widely this can go. I've just never seen something that I have an idea and the student comes back in a week with the thing working. And that's partly because these tools are so good. Again, you just upload data to the cloud, push a button, and get the working model down. So what are some of the things we need to worry about then? What makes this so magical? What even allows me to do this at Stanford? Well, one of the things is there are these open models. So the model has been estimated by someone else. I can download the weights. It's like the coefficients in a statistical model. If it's y equals x beta, these are the betas, but there's just a lot of x's, a very complicated function, but I know all the coefficients, and then I can update those coefficients and make it work better for my data set using local data. And this is, when I have these medium-sized open models, I can do them on Stanford hardware, so it's not out of reach of owning a machine or two to be able to do this work on medium-sized data sets. And again, I only need to do it on medium-sized data sets because I'm not trying to reinvent language. I'm just have a specific application. So if we think about some scenarios for what this means, you can first think about an open or interoperable scenario. This is a scenario where those open models continue to exist. Governments don't get scared of the security implications and shut them down. And again, some of the closed models have been lobbying governments to try to shut down the open models. Now, it's a little hard to put the genie back in the bottle because everybody's already downloaded the weights of these pretty good models, and you can already do an enormous amount of stuff with the models that are out there. But nonetheless, what matters for this to persist is that those models are good enough when combined with your own specialized data and adapted relative to the ones that you have to pay for. The fact that there's a good open model will keep the price down for the closed model. And it will keep the closed models innovating because they need to be good enough better than the open models in order to get people to pay for them. So this could be a very good scenario where there is both innovation, but also low prices. And low prices are very, very important. Like free is very important if you're a government or an academic trying to prototype something. So I think that's very important. Cloud providers may host many models and developer tools and support interoperability. So not just the big cloud providers, but like I'm using a smaller cloud provider that's a startup out of Stanford called Together.ai. That's the one I'm using. And that's one where you just upload the data and push a button. It fine-tunes on Llama and you come down. And I can fine-tune a model for like $10. So that's awesome with millions of observations that I'm fine-tuning on. So that's cheap and easy. these low-code developer tools and plugins. And over time, hopefully, those things will build dashboards and build tools. So I don't even need to hire students to analyze the data, because there'll be common ways that people analyze it, and they'll be able to also produce measures and analysis that help me understand when and why it's working. Right now, that doesn't exist. That's the software I have to write. That's what my students have to write. But there's no reason that that wouldn't be also socialized and available as free software packages. Now, there's another challenge here, content creators. Is there going to be a data market? This is another huge topic. We could spend a whole day on this. Who's going to write news? Who's going to write novels if it's all ingested into a system and you don't give the credit to whoever created it? One possibility in this open ecosystem is that the open models are general purpose, but then anybody who needs specific content buys it from the content creator, and then the content creator is rewarded for the incremental value of their content. That's a very optimistic scenario. I think we're going to have less news and less content created. I don't see how we get out of that, but at least this scenario, we have some. They get paid by the downstream applications and the users who really value the data. And widespread adoption, competitive prices for applications, small governments, big governments, development economists build stuff, and nurses and teachers all over the world use it. Okay, that's optimistic. Pessimistic, more pessimistic scenario. We somehow shut down the open models, or people stop deciding they want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to create them and give them away for free. Then suddenly the cost goes up. And now we can't afford to do these things anymore. We can't build them for low revenue scenarios. Furthermore, we might see, in the closed scenario, we might see a general purpose one-stop shop dominate, perhaps with its own app store as a barrier to entry. Perhaps they lock up access to chips. And on the user side, perhaps they make exclusive agreements, say with a phone. A phone operating system can control what you do on that phone. They can certainly control whether one app can open and close other apps and move data across apps. So we could see the phone say, oh, for security reasons, we're only going to have one AI that is a general purpose AI on this phone, and I'm going to make an exclusive agreement with this major content provider, and nobody else gets to compete. Then they get all the user data, and nobody else can build, and nobody makes ones that are any better. And prices are high, and there's not as much innovation or competition. And then we end up having to somehow regulate them, which we have found to be hard historically. We might also then, because the prices are high, we might also see barriers to entry in applications. It's harder to build applications. We don't see as many applications. They'll be focused on the profitable things rather than the socially impactful things. We'll see slower adoption and focus on the wrong areas. So policy really matters here, because policy can keep us in the scenario where the prices are low, and that's very important. Of course, there are security issues. Now, this is super hard to think about, though, in general, now going out, what do you measure? There are feedbacks and externalities everywhere here. Like, the whole world is changing. We can think about, like, in COVID, what happened when we just changed everything all at once, and it was very complicated, and nobody really predicted exactly what was going to happen, and this is going to have the same thing. You know, AI is going to affect the education process for workers. It's going to affect the productivity and training process for workers. It might substitute for workers. It might complement for workers. So AI is going to have very complex effects on labor markets. If prices are low for goods, then that's going to affect consumer demand. If wages go down, that affects consumer demand. So you know, there's a feedback loop there. If the price of labor goes down, but the price of products goes down with it, then people still spend money on other things. Whereas if the price of labor goes down, but the price of goods stays high, that's what happens when you have concentration. There's a markup for the firm, and that's very bad for the macroeconomy. So that's something to be very concerned about. Transportation and communication can be altered. I used to give these slides before COVID. Now I don't need to tell that story. Just remember what happened. Industry structure and prices, these all feedback. And then, as many authors have shown, everything's endogenous. So, you know, depending on the aging of your workforce and the shortage of workers, people will adopt or not certain technologies faster or slower. So when I think through all these general equilibrium things, again, in sort of a good scenario, we could think prices fall. When prices fall, more people, for consumer goods, people demand more services. They get more childcare, they get more health. And then if we complement workers, the workers can transition into jobs serving those consumers, and the economy grows. That requires a competitive market in AI and not too many harmful apps and uses that destroy our societies before we get there. The pessimistic scenario, prices for consumer goods fall slowly, markups stay high, even as the labor costs go down. Second, things like call centers get automated in geographic areas that then get a death spiral, where a bunch of people get laid off, they don't go to the grocery store, the grocery store people don't have any money, and the whole geographic area spirals down. And of course, we've seen examples of that in the past with manufacturing. A third component of a bad scenario is that we all get manipulated to be outraged and hate each other and don't want to make any investments in government institutions that help workers transition or do anything else that keep us from blowing ourselves up. And we end up we get power concentrated too quickly. Certainly if firms get a lot of concentration of power, that can be complementary to governments having concentration of power, and things may or may not be created that are to benefit the average citizen, and things can be very bad. So we have to navigate these transitions, and AI policy and investment affect the trajectories. We need to think about competition policy and industry structure. We need to invest in worker augmenting technology, anticipate and mitigate local downward spirals, anticipate adoption frictions. What is it that really gets in the way of adoption? It's not the technology anymore. It's the organizational capacity to absorb it, and mitigation of harmful uses. So what do I think then from a statistical perspective? Now, I actually do statistics. A lot of people don't even know I'm an economist these days. I go to conferences like, oh, you're an economist? So I do statistics. Today, I haven't done statistics for you. But the first step of doing statistics, I think, is to come up with the frameworks. And so I tried to give you some elements of frameworks that aren't as commonly talked about. We need to think about industry structure, layers, but not just like the application layer, but the B2B application, B2C application layer. To be able to measure those, we need to separate those. We need to think about externalities and downstream impacts, positive and negative, there's a zillion of them. Adoption frictions, investment in beneficial applications, and are we getting enough of it? National resilience and capability, and also just a reconfiguration of the role of government. And we think of this as a new production technology for government services. It can be a new production technology for government services. It can also, of course, not everything governments do is good or beneficial to its citizens. It's a new production technology for everything that governments do, both harmful and beneficial. And so for the measurement and research, then, we need to collect the data and analyze the impact. But this is so complicated with so much general equilibrium that it really needs the theoretical frameworks to be able to make sense of it. And finally, as you guys have talked about already, building tools to help researchers. This is the golden age. You can bring in undergraduate interns and they can work productively. And that's going to be a reality in a few years. We're going to be much less limited by human limitations on how much work we can get done as statisticians. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Are we on mic?
Yeah.
Good. Fascinating. We have many questions. So I will use the next. Our time is a little tight, but if I may, we may request maybe 5 to 10 more minutes as originally planned. So we have like 15 minutes for maybe a couple of quick questions. Let me start with the first question on the impact of AI. We look at your good scenario, bad scenario. What about the impact on different industries? Which industry will benefit? Which industry will possibly be hurt? Which industries will be most impacted by AI?
Yeah, so I think we're all trying to figure that out right now. And part of what we need to do in this, you all, the people measuring, are going to have a better sense of this, because you can't just read about this on the web to see what firms are doing and governments are doing internally. But I do think like white collar process work is hugely impacted. And so that's something and again, that's already happening. The call center's already happening and really has happened. So those are places where we just know for sure it's happening. What it does elsewhere, I think, really does depend on where are the bottlenecks. And that's something that we don't have a lot of data about. I think, again, I would go back to the pandemic. Like, we didn't know how much shipping or ports were bottlenecks, or we didn't know that there was only one place to get this particular product, or one factory shuts down and then the whole world supply chain breaks, right? So we did learn something about a certain kind of bottleneck in the last couple of years, and we learned that bottlenecks can be important. What we're going to see now is that if certain limitations are lifted, where's the next bottleneck? And again, I think it's organizational capacity. So what I would say, though, is I think that augmenting service providers, because this is general purpose technology, if somebody builds a good nurse application, that can be like used globally with and the way this software gets built, it's very easy to adapt it to context, or once you have the general structure to give local data, local information. So I think it'll be very easy to take applications and localize them. So I think that anything that's augmenting service providers, where there's lots of people doing the same thing, whether it's teachers, nurses, et cetera, will be very impacted. Some of the other things are a little harder to say, like whether, where are the bottlenecks in agriculture? Where are the bottlenecks in, manufacturing? And can you really, make a breakthrough there just with this digital technology? That's a little bit less clear. And the automation of factories, of course, has been on a long, slow trajectory. And I would say the generative AI doesn't directly change some of the physical constraints that are being faced there. I think the big breakthrough has been in sort of making it very easy to express things in natural language, and it's almost like we've made everybody a developer, and everybody can be a no-code developer now. And so it's like, what could you do if everybody could just snap your fingers and build an application to automate something in their job or do something? That's the thing there's been like a big breakthrough on. Stuff like, robotics has been on a steady trajectory, but I wouldn't say that it's like a complete, game changer in the last 2 years.
Thank you. Maybe that naturally leads to our next question on labor market. We see your good scenario and bad scenario. Let me also quote one gentleman, Joe Tsai, one of the co-founders of Alibaba. He recently said that if you want to survive the AI age, you have to be top 10% of anything you do. Otherwise, you're going to lose your job. Do you agree with that? And also, following that, do you believe in UBI, universal basic income?
So I'm not an expert on universal basic income, so I'm going to punt on that one. But there's been a lot of people studying that, so you should have someone review the evidence on that. Mm-hmm. But who summarized the evidence, who's been working in it. But on the top 10%, sort of, but actually there are very contradictory claims. So what I'm hearing in terms of the software development is that once people are using AI-assisted coding, the 20th percentile people look as good as the top 5%. And the top 5% don't get as much better. Because in some sense, the top 5% are sort of better than the AI code, but this brings everybody up to the baseline. And so, I hire a lot of students in my life, and young people, and I worked with people in DOJ who were coming in from straight out of school. So I've supervised a lot of people doing work with data. And I think today I'm less concerned about coding skills than I ever have been. Now, what is it I need instead? Now I can, instead of just getting someone and giving them a Python or R coding test and seeing if they can write the syntax right, now my interviews are about asking, well, how should you structure the project. Like you separate it into data cleaning and cross-sectional analysis and panel data analysis, and how would you do checks to make sure that your code worked? And so if you were a software developer engineering manager, your job would be like that. You would be coming up with systems. You say bugs are going to happen. I'm supervising young people. Those young people will make bugs. So my job as an engineering manager is to make sure there are tests in place that we catch the bugs, and that we architect things so that I can give somebody a job, and then it's going to be able to interact with somebody else doing a job over here. So it's like structuring code so that you can delegate it to relatively junior people and be robust to their inevitable mistakes. Now, that's what a junior coder does, because they're in a sense delegating stuff to the AI. They need to structure the code. They need to think about what they're doing. They need to evaluate whether it's doing what they want it to do. They need to make decisions about what it should do. But the coding itself is already outsourced. So that says, no, you don't have to be, you can be a 5% coder. If you're a good thinker, then you'll be very successful. So I think that it's really changed the game. And this is what I'm saying. I think globally we used to have these huge returns to people who had a lot of specialized skill and experience in doing stuff, and that's just not as valuable as it used to be. Now, you still want people who have gone through that, because those people have learned also along the way about how to be good architects. But it's we can all be architects. So that's a different skill. It's certainly being high IQ, it's logical thinking, it's planning, it's executive function, and it's something that economists do a lot of, which is turning a problem into something quantitative, something that can be measured. Statisticians and economists specialize in that. Those skills are much higher demand, but the execution skills are less important.
Thank you for that. That's very comforting to economists. The next question is on the distributional aspect of AI. There is good scenario, there is bad scenario. What kind of policy would you recommend to try to make AI to be more inclusive?
Yeah, so I think I really tried to cover a lot of that in my presentation, that it's very important that it is cheap and that there are free developer tools. And that's what we have now, and that's something that is, I think, allowing so many people to participate in this revolution. And when I go to these conferences and one social science researchers, one after the other, showing, in the last year, I built this app and I deployed it in this developing country, and I ran a randomized controlled experiment, and I measured that it made teachers teach better, or, wow, think about how long projects usually take, and since ChatGPT came out, people came up with the idea, built it, implemented it, designed the RCT, ran it, gathered the data, and evaluated it. Wow. So I think this is, we just need to, keep doing what we're doing in a sense, and hope that the developer tools evolve. So the main things that are getting in the way now is first of all, you just getting started. Do you have your data organized? But it used to be your data had to be really organized. To use machine learning, you need to clean it, get it into a tabular format, format all the variables. Now that step is automated by the AI, so the data cleaning is much easier. Of course, if you put garbage in, you'll still get garbage out. But dealing with missing values, or just normalizing things, using heuristics to turn text into categorical variables, all of that stuff is much, much simplified with the modern AI tools. So you need the data infrastructure, but not as much as you used to. And you need a little bit of compute. And you need someone who has an undergraduate level experience with coding. And then you can build stuff. And that's that. So I think the limiting factor really is just we need to identify the application areas, build them, But then there's also going to be a proliferation, right? It's actually not going to be now the problem that we don't have a nursing assistant app. It's going to be that we have 200. And we don't know which one to use, and we don't know whether to trust them. So building the tools that evaluate them, that assess them, that make sure they're safe, that's also very important. But that's one reason the research community, I think, needs to be involved, because that's the kind of stuff that we're relatively good at, actually. Of course, anybody who's followed the technology industry knows that the technology industry, the consumer-facing technology industry, will just put things out there, and sometimes they break, and sometimes they have very negative consequences, and they move fast, and sometimes things break. Where if the research community has access to the tools and does the work, we may be more better positioned to help evaluate these technologies and guide them and improve them in a good direction. So that's going to be the other limiting factor. It's a little bit like when Coursera comes out or Khan Academy. First oh my gosh, everybody in the world can learn calculus, but then you're like, well, but there's now like 50,000 ways to learn calculus on YouTube. And an individual person feels overwhelmed and they still don't actually learn calculus. So we're going to have just this proliferation of stuff, and then getting people, trusted people, to curate it and make one thing actually work really well will still take time.
Great. Next question will be on statistics, because this is our statistical forum. We saw you have one slide on the data and statistical issues, but you didn't have time to elaborate. But I think for us, we want to hear from you. What do you see as the priorities in terms of, for the statistical world, to measure AI, to measure the impact of AI? What do you see, in the next couple of years? What should we focus on in terms of measurement?
Well, I know there's a time lag, but I think what we really need to know is what's happening inside of firms. And I think just measuring employment is not really good enough, because what you're going to see is that everybody's job is just going to be a little bit more automated and a little bit more automated. And, and then we don't know whether the bottleneck will be somewhere else, and we don't know. It all depends on the shapes of these production functions and cost curves and demand curves, whether that means you hire more of those people or less of those people. So we really need to not just understand, are you hiring AI developers? Because you might not need that many AI developers. We want to understand how are people's jobs changing, and I think that will be much more incremental. But in a few of these areas, like the call centers, I would really watch for those, and there you need to talk to companies and talk to people, especially things that are being provided as software as a service, or like software in a box, where lots of people can adopt it at once. And so call centers fits all of those things, and they're geographically localized. Those are ones I would really watch very carefully on, and like any country that specializes in call centers, like I'm very concerned about that country. I've been concerned about those regions and those cities and those countries for the last 10 years, and I think the moment is here where we're going to be worried about those. And there may be other applications like that, where there's been outsourcing of low-level work, that's geographically concentrated. That's where I would really especially prioritize what's happening inside of companies and what's happening for this like kind of mass-produced software.
Very good. I have one more question, which relates to what lies ahead. Now we are all investing. Many firms, including IMF, we are investing a lot on generative AI. But is that the end game, or is that only, one step of human endeavor in terms of, designing artificial intelligence? For example, I'm reading a new book on quantum computing. Will quantum computing become a new technology that will replace all the generative AI we have, or it will be a natural evolution? What we invested today will not be wasted. That's my question. Are we going to see another revolutionary technology lying ahead that will be disruptive in the sense that what we invest today may be wasted?
So I am not an expert on quantum computing. What I hear at all these conferences I go to is that no. Quantum computing has a very special set of things it does, and it's not like, parallel computing of large data. In fact, I just visited someplace and they were like, oh, we got this big quantum computer and we don't know what to do with it. Can you think of any ideas? So I think I wouldn't worry so much about quantum computing. I think what I would worry more about is, the language is amazing. And so it is really amazing what we have with generative AI, because it means that you can build an app in natural language. And that's incredible. It makes every single one of us a developer. Anyone in this room could develop an application if you took a week. I think but then, okay, what do you want your application to do? And if your application needs to do something that can only be done if you have lots and lots of data, like make a very nuanced prediction that is state contingent about like what's going to happen as a function of all these other variables, and it's contextual, and you only could know those conditional probabilities if you had data, well, you can build an application, but you still have to like do the prediction problem. So one of the applications I've been working on both because I care about worker transitions, but also as sort of a methodological science project, is I've been working on using LLMs as a foundation model for the next job prediction problem. So if I want to know the conditional probability, conditional on your last 10 jobs, what's the probability distribution over your 11th job? Okay, that's a standard, statistics problem. The job titles are text, and I show that using a large language model as a foundation for that prediction problem, you can do very well. But if you do it off the shelf, okay, so ChatGPT can come up with something that looks like the 11th job if you give it 10 jobs, but it gets the probability distribution all wrong. Because how would it know that conditional probability? You need a lot of data to estimate that, and you need to have been very careful that's what you want. It's trained to get a plausible sounding job, not the exact conditional probability. But when you fine tune it on, say, large government administrative data, then it both understands, it can learn this very high dimensional prediction problem because it understands the text, but it also calibrates the probabilities to the actual empirical probabilities. And so if it says it's, 0.1% of being a manufacturing worker next, then that's on average correct. So that needs data and analysis. So I guess like the idea, some of the probably statisticians and economists would never think this to start with. A lot of the engineers will claim that these models just know everything. They magically know everything. And so they said, oh, well, of course, these models, ChatGPT, it could figure that out. It could figure out what the conditional probability is of being a manufacturing worker after 10 years as a retail worker. But no, if you understand statistics, like it has to get that information from somewhere. That's a very hard problem. So it's not, my belief is it's not magic. It's magic in terms of producing software, producing apps, producing tools, automating human labor, but it's not magic in terms of knowing statistical distributions of economic quantities where the data itself might be proprietary. And so we still have to do the hard work of the statistics to actually do anything with it.
Very good. This has been fascinating. Let's have a round of applause for Susan.
That's a great last sentence to follow up with. We still need statistics and statistical work. Thank you so much, Bao. Thank you so much, Susan. It's really inspiring, food for thoughts. We all know AI will change the world, but how is it going to change it? What way? Is it the good scenario, the pessimistic scenario? We as statisticians want to give the information to have impact that. Thanks for the challenges you gave us, for looking inside the companies. We look at skills, of course, but that's only part of the answer. We will look at call centers and service providers and see whether this productivity gains will lead to more outputs or less labor. And yeah, this is nice inputs and nice setting for the rest of the 2 days. We'll have lunch now and we resume at 10:30. Thank you so much.